I'm Owen Bondurant. I am a partner in Independent RX. Also am a partner with Tim in two pharmacies that we own, a compounding and long-term care. If you don't know Independent RX, we do a few things. We help people start and buy pharmacies. We provide accounting and tax for pharmacies. And we help people sell pharmacies, which is why we're here today. I'll let my this is partner Tim introduce himself.
Thanks, Owen. Thanks for jumping on the call today, everyone. Basically, I'm also a pharmacist. Been doing this, bought my family out in about 2000. So for 25 years, myself with Owen's dad, and then now with you. We've owned a bunch of pharmacies, but right now, our biggest business is our consulting side. And what we try to do on that is try to help you guys navigate through, your journey, whether it's beginning, middle, or end. We try to provide some influence and help for you to be a sounding board as you're trying to make decisions. And the biggest thing that we found is that, we need to give you information. And that's kind of why we do these webinars, is just to kind of give you, the ever-changing pulse of what's happening, like in our business. And ever since I've been in it, and I'm sure you too, it changes, which can either be really frustrating or good. I mean, I like the change because it makes us think, and then we've got to we got to solve problems, and solving problems can create opportunity. So that's the fun thing about being in business. So I don't know what stage everyone who's on the call or watching is in, but we'll try to give you what our insights of what we're seeing.
Yeah, and along those lines, we will be recording this, so it'll be available on our website, social media, YouTube. Um, and if you have questions as we go along, there is a Q&A at the bottom. Drop a question in there. We'll try to answer it as we go or at the end. So, our primary thing that we put out here is that we want to talk about the current market. Um, I guess, Tim, as an overall, what are you seeing in terms of the number of sales and the market in 2025 so far?
Well, I would tell you that the market's kind of hot. We go through these ebbs and flows of we'll call it inventory. There's always inventory for us as an owner that needs to sell or wants to sell. So that's usually a fairly constant thing, but can be motivated by circumstances like obviously cash flow, retirement, things like that. Right now, and the thing that we really hope is that there's people that are buyers. Hey, sellers want buyers. Think about it in the real estate market. It's a much better time to sell your house when there's lots of buyers because it increases the price. So, I wouldn't say there's abundance of buyers, but there's a good mix of buyers.
Yeah.
We have, which has always been the case, but they kind of, ebb and flow. Like you've got your strategic buyers, who could be, outside sources. Like for compounding pharmacies, you got sources that are trying to get in the 503A business. You've got multi-store owners that are trying to add to their portfolio because they've found that they're better cost of goods and synergies of owning more stores, which is usually true. And then you have people like that are like me or you, just a pharmacist or, business person trying to get into the, business of pharmacy, and they think they have an opportunity or they have an idea. What's usually consistent is that, you're always worried about things you can't control, like we can't control interest rates. So right now, I would say there's probably more volume gonna happen because interest rates seem to be on the decline. As we got into uncertain times with the DIRs, it got a little bit harder, just to finance it, which decreased value. So, for the most part, we've got some good stabilization in prices, and people who are doing different things that are profitable are definitely able to sell their business. People who have, let's say, a traditional mix of business still have value, but it's not the high end right now. And really, that's kind of motivated by the fact that our chains have been in and out of the market buyers. The chains, for the most part of this year, were kind of pausing due to the Rite Aid gobble. Rite Aid created a big flux of acquisitions for the chains, which decreased their appetite for buying, independent community pharmacies. And while we can all kind of go good or bad on, a chain being involved into the mix, the good thing about them is, first off, they're always, a possibility as a buyer, but their value to us, kind of goes up and down. Thankfully, their business is in as much or more turmoil than your typical community pharmacy. As you can see, they're still impacted by reimbursements and the shuttering of stores, the cost of labor, and they're decreasing, outfront sales. So a lot of the things that affect us, can affect them on greater magnitudes. And so but the good news is, like, they've digested, some of those acquisitions with the Rite Aids. So, what I'm seeing is they're back in as a buyer. So while they've held off making acquisitions for the most part this year, they're back into asking. And the best way to increase your value to them is to be patient,
Yeah.
and hope that they've got something next to you that doesn't do that well. That'll increase your value. But the simple thing of selling a pharmacy is math. It's really math. I mean, if you make a lot of money, you're going to get paid a lot of money to sell your business. That's a simple fact, and you're going to be able to get financing, or you're going to be able to use your own cash to buy things. So, lots of people will call us and ask about, values for selling. And the nice thing is there's a value, but there's a range, chains, for instance, they're, we've seen a chain offer of inventory,
Yeah.
just inventory, and then that they would pay on the backside of the acquisition of, how much they're able to absorb. And then we've seen, your traditional sales with chains, where they're going to go, let's say $5 to $12 a script, which
Yeah.
is not a way to measure, but it's the truth. That's what they're doing. And then we've got some strategic buyers buying pharmacies that, let's say, in the compounding space, that have no business, and they're offering, money just for a license and a lab. So some people are buying just for the opportunity.
Yeah.
So it's, as always, it's, I guess the good news is it's active. It's definitely an active marketplace.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's a good summary.
And yeah, and I think the activeness is coming from a few things you said in there. I mean, honestly, up until this year, it was a little rocky. So I think sellers and buyers were hesitant. We had the whole COVID, you know, mess. So people, one, weren't sure what was happening. And then two, a lot of pharmacies were so busy with testing and shots and all this other stuff that, I mean, they weren't thinking about selling. And then buyers weren't sure, should I be buying, and even CVS, I mean, they put all their sales on hold because they had so much COVID stuff to deal with that they couldn't, they didn't have time to buy a store. And then we got out of that and double DIR fees came around. And, as a seller, you're like, well, am I going to sell when my numbers look really bad? And then as a buyer, you're going, I don't really know what I'm getting. So that kind of caused some things. So 2025 was finally where you're like, okay, uh, things are generally normal. And I do think, unless something changes, there isn't major, uh, issues coming forward that we know of, right? We don't, I think 2026 should probably be about the same as 25. That kind of stable is good for acquisitions because, as a seller, you can present kind of consistent numbers, and as a buyer, they see consistent numbers, and so everyone knows what they're getting at. So I would foresee, at least for the next year, we would continue to see a lot of buyers and a lot of sellers. And as Tim mentioned, we're seeing hospitals, private equity, I mean, all kinds of groups getting into buying various different things. And so that also creates movement in the market. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, your hope when you're running a business that there's activity, and most of the ebbs and flows of it are healthy in terms of now you're able to see financials for what they are. The level of sophistication that buyers now have to look at our mix of businesses has never before been as great, that they can pretty much, we could have two businesses filling 50,000 prescriptions annually, and one be a winner and one not, just by the mix. You're seeing the chains and everybody also have different impacts of the GLP-1s and brand name reimbursements. But all those things, if they have happened now for months, or over a year.
Years.
So now we're able to tell you, I guess factual information, not guesses. When you have these odd things like COVID, for instance, I mean, odd is probably not the right word. I apologize, but that's that's a once in a lifetime sort of thing. So how do you
Deal with that.
you figure that out from a business standpoint? The challenges as a pharmacy are the same challenges we've had for 25 years. We're reliant upon PBMs and wholesalers to allow us to make money.
Yeah, well, let's talk about some of that. I mean, PBNs are always factoring. Then you mentioned, one store will have 50,000, another will have and get different prices. I mean, for example, the chains will literally take all your script data and put it into their system and see, does your mix match with their good payers and their good mix of generics or brands or the things they're making money. And so two pharmacies can look exactly the same and get a
Yeah,
very
the value can be
difference
twice.
in
It could be
value.
two times.
Yeah,
The value can be
two
twice
times.
as much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that it may not make sense to you and I. We could both be doing $3 million, but one has more value to somebody else.
Yeah. And we get a lot, the question a lot also, like, well, who would even want to buy? Well, what you have to remember is, you take a multi-store owner, some of these multi-store owners have figured out niches, whether that be vaccines or point of care testing or consults or, there's just a laundry list of things now. And so they'll take your book of business that's decent and then they will add that on because they've already done it. So they're just replicating what they've done at other stores. So to them, your business has value and it's easier for them to take a patient base and doctor base that you already have and add those things on.
The other thing that's good that like we just had that happen or something like that happen this week, Owen, where some people have looked to make acquisitions to keep their GCR numbers okay.
Yeah.
That they're doing some high end products that have um, effects to their purchasing ability contracts with the wholesalers, and they're looking for business to add on to help them stay at ratios that make sense to keep their, let's say, cost minus 5 or 6
On the
on
high end
whack.
stuff. Yeah.
Yes, because I think we all know if you're paying like say whack minus 2.5 or something on a branding product, you go do that with a PBM and you've lost 3%.
Yes. Um,
So
and
I
and
mean it's interesting that there's there is opportunity for lots of different reasons.
Yeah, and we keep seeing, new niches. I think I'll see every single little niche, and then we'll get a phone call, and I'll be like, "Oh, well, that's an interesting niche." I mean, Tim, you've said this many times, 10 years ago, even, like, the only way to grow or make your business more profitable was to add scripts or cut payroll. Like, but now, I mean, pharmacies can do a lot more. Um, they're doing injections, they're doing consults, they're prescribing, I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And some people have built entire businesses around a niche. Um,
And I'm all in favor of, like, when we help someone, start or buy a store, one of our first questions, I think, has to do with, the niche that they're going to go pursue. I mean, you've got to have a niche, but you also want to have more than one niche.
yeah, yep. And a lot of these niche businesses are looking to add things on to diversify their niche, for a reason or two. So we're seeing quite a bit of that. And they may also own other businesses, behavioral health, nursing homes, hospitals. Like, they're owning other businesses. We see transportation businesses. We see adult daycares. So people will own like the whole market on a particular business, but they also want your business to kind of keep it diversified and have something else. So, there's the market has changed in that way. I mean, even pre-COVID, really, it was like, all right, you know, I own a store that does 80,000 scripts, and now I'm buying another one that owns 80,000, and that was kind of it. And that's who the buyer was, or the chain would buy it. Um, Now we're seeing a lot of different types of buyers. There is certainly also your your pharmacist who works at a chain and wants to own a store now. And is a younger person who wants to, continue it for the next 25 years. Those people are also out there. So it's not just these strategic buyers either. There's also individuals who want to go add things and change things and um, do et cetera. And there's quite a few of those as well. And I'd say what's driving that is, you know, I mean, frankly, the chain job is not very good. And so it's like, well, if I'm going to work really hard and, you know, kind of have not the greatest work environment, I might as well do it for myself. Um,
Well, as pharmacists, we're just top end when we get out of school. We don't have the ability to make any more money unless we become more diversified in other things. It's the same thing that happens to pharmacists and pharmacy owners, that you need to become, you know, diversified and get other sources of income, or you're going to be stuck making the same amount of money or less. If you don't try, what maybe, let's say right now you've got, let's say, the 503As. Okay, and that's, owning, a compounding lab. So, which is patient specific. So that right now is great. And it's always been good, but you're going to have to find, what is that next thing all the time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What is that next thing? I mean, long-term care can be like that too, right? You always got to find the next home in case you lose a home. Um, you're always trying to do the next thing. I mean, let's talk a little bit about that. You mentioned in retail, you're seeing inventory all the way up to $12 a script filled annually plus inventory. Um, and compounding the long-term care, I mean, compounding is where we're seeing the biggest multiples, right?
Yeah, well, compounding, is I'll say very hot. I mean,
Yeah.
because the nice thing about it is you've got lots of different, I mean, you have bigger buyers. I mean, you have, let's say, we all know or heard of, let's say, the Hims and Hers, who have been, dramatically, unbelievably successful. selling compounds. Like that's
Yep.
their business model. I mean, you first used to see them, about men and women's health and now weight loss, and it'll be that way for a while because we're all looking at things to make us healthier and anti-aging. There's like just a bunch of things that when you see someone who's successful, lots of people want to follow and replicate. So there's a lot of money coming into the marketplace to replicate that at smaller levels.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what, I've not looked at their earnings package, but my guess is they're making millions and millions and millions of dollars, and that's a month, not a
Yeah.
year. And as investors, we don't need to make as much money. If we're going to put together a fund, and we've got, our targets are lower, but there is an opportunity because there's already people in the marketplace doing it. So we're not trying to, like, I think we've talked about compounding, for instance. We used to spend so much time educating people to what compounding did.
Yeah. And now
And and,
pretty
and
much
now
everyone
like
does.
like now there's an ad on like every day, like telling you what that what compounding is, so I don't have to tell you.
Yeah. And so because of that, we are seeing bigger multiples. I mean, you're going to see at least three times. I mean, we see four, even five times. So some of that has to do with is it the right person and where you're at and your lab. And I mean, there's a lot of factors to that, but some of these multiples are getting, I mean, really, really good. It's hot right now. I don't know how long that's going to last, but it's been hot the last probably year or so. Um, so yeah, keep that in mind. In the long-term care space, not quite as hot as compounding, but again, we're seeing strategic buyers, right? Everything from hospitals to nursing home businesses to um, other adult daycare, people who are in that space already are looking to buy more long-term care, and they typically will have a bunch of business they want to put into your infrastructure. So if your business is doing 5 million, they have 5 more million to put on top of it. So they just need a spot to do it quickly. So sometimes we're seeing multiples there of three, 3.5 as well. Um, and so, whereas on a retail store, we're seeing two, 2.5, right? So, those businesses are getting more, um, greater multiples. Now, there are factors about where you're located, whether they need you in there. I mean, those do factor in. So, you know, just keep that in mind that it can vary by location and your mix of business, things like SNFs versus ALF versus group home, that stuff matters. How much they think they can retain, et cetera. So they're going to look at all of that. And as Tim said earlier, they can now there's so much data out there that they can slice and dice your data and see exactly what your mix is. And they're going to look at all of that.
And in all these discussions, I mean, I think we're coming back to the same thing we said at the beginning, that we have a very healthy um, environment for business transactions.
Yeah.
There's definitely opportunities if you're looking at cashing in or retiring. And there's also, as you own a business, there's ability to make it more valuable, right now by doing a little bit different work. I mean, because there is profit opportunities out there, and if that all dries up, then there wouldn't be buyers, but um, there are.
Yeah, and I would encourage you, and I mean, I guess you're not going to put in a full program probably in the next year. Um, but if you're a couple years out from selling, I mean, find some niches and add it on, or at least one, because, if you have something going and have the infrastructure in place, people like that. If you have system in place, they can immediately, come in and start growing that business. And so, that does increase your value. And, we talk about big things like 503A and ALFs and SNFs and stuff, but, even just a vaccine program, your point of care testing, there are people who know what they're doing there. So if you have the people in place and the systems in place that they can go scale it, that's attractive to them. Plus, it adds profit to your bottom line, which, in the end, as Tim mentioned at the very beginning, profit equals bigger price. Regardless of the niche.
Yeah, that's called simple math, and simple math always wins.
Yeah, so if you've ever been on one of our webinars, I think Tim and I say it every single time. Um, Understand your financials, get good financials, start cleaning them up, know what your personal expenses are. Um, don't do crazy tax things, a month before you're about to sell and list it. Like, it needs to look good because that can make people want to buy your business more. Um, I feel like I repeat myself almost every month on this, but
If
just
you've got
reality.
something if you've got something odd going on, you better be able to explain it reasonably,
Yeah.
because what you don't want to do is to give anybody a caution that the financials are not worth anything. Everything is about confidence when you're trying to sell your business. Like, as a buyer needs to to know that you understand your business and you're able to articulate that. Um, and and again, I guess really that's kind of ends up being my job, right? My job is to help people sell. So what my job is to try to give someone who's looking at buying it some confidence of what this business is and what it can do. Because everything is true, is that when a business transitions, it's going to change. There's going to be a some sort of delta that happens during any transition, and hopefully the person who's looking to take over your business has a has a good solid plan.
Yeah. Um, but the more you know about your numbers and your processes and staff, and the more you can, if you would work with us, for example, explain that to us, the more we can, articulate that to the buyers and, um, give them, like Tim said, confidence that you're the right fit for them. And I mean, sometimes you can't control that. You may not be the right fit, but if you are the right fit, we want to give them all the confidence that you are, for sure. Um, so I mean uh, we're going to keep it kind of short because, oh, hold on. Um, so are there any states you've come across that have been hot in a good way for transactions? So we get this question a lot, about what's the state with the most transactions and so forth. Well, so first off, the states with the most people and the most independents are always the ones that have the most sales. So Florida, California, Texas, right? The biggest states always have the most transactions. Um, Outside of that, they kind of go in ebbs and flows, as to uh, which ones are hot and which ones aren't. I don't know that as a seller, that's something that you need to be super concerned about. Because, like, for example, if you're in Ohio and you're near Cleveland, let's say, like, there's a bunch of other independents, there's a lot of people, um, like, there's buyers. Right? It's a big population. So, I mean, if you're out in a real rural area, that can be a problem because there's just no one there to like take over your business. So I don't know that state to state it's like really that big of a difference.
I think what you said, Owen, at the beginning is really the answer. The answer is that if you're in a big state, they tend to always be hotter. That's just the way it is. States that are hard to regulate, or their regulation system, like California and Florida, are hard to do business in for some reasons for pharmacies. They're going to have that's either a positive or a negative, right?
Yeah.
So it really depends who that buyer is. But again, it's easier to have a buyer when you're in a more populous area, and in some ways you'd think it'd be almost, oh, I want to stay away from busy environments. That's not really all the case in pharmacy. um the thing that is almost true is that, okay, it's harder to get someone to buy a rural store, but usually their PBM contracts are better.
Yeah.
I mean, and their customer is more loyal. When we were in our growth phase, I mean, we were buying stores in rural areas.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's because the profitability was better, the customer was more loyal. But that was like our mission, if that makes sense, because we could identify better with those segments of people than, let's say, we never looked at opening a store in New York City, right? Or New York.
Yep.
But oh my gosh, there's so many pharmacies in New York. If
I
you
mean,
got a
there's,
pharmacy for sale in New York or New Jersey, you're going to be able to sell it.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
guess.
it's it, so really it almost any store has an opportunity.
Yeah. It's just, more rural ones. The good news
Yeah.
is they do tend to be more profitable. So that attracts people. However, there's just not as many people to buy it. Whereas in New York City, I mean, there's an independent on every block, and you put it up for sale and it sells, even if it's not good sometimes. So it's a back and forth. We also have a question about Texas, the current state of interest. I mean, there's a lot of buyers in Texas, a ton of them. So there's more buyers than sellers, pretty much always has been. That doesn't mean you can't get one if you're a buyer. As a seller, Texas is a good place to be, especially if you're near Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin. Uh,
Oh, yeah. The bigger there's we have people always calling to find out, in Texas, those areas, and stores that are outside of those metroplexes are, unfortunately, they're harder to sell because the buyers aren't as plentiful. And that's where everything is, kind of led by, is, we want more buyers.
yep,
More buyers always increase your value.
yep. Another question about how do you think the big beautiful bill will impact sellers? My experience with these big federal rules is they really don't make much of an impact on acquisitions. They're too big and too broad and don't really impact you individually or local markets. The bigger thing we see is Medicaid reform bills. If a state redoes their Medicaid and now you're making $10, $12 a script, guess what? That's probably 20, 30% of your business. You're more profitable. And what we said about being profitable, you get more money. So the more local Medicaid reforms have a bigger impact, in our opinion. That's just been historically what we've seen about the large um, changes at the federal level. I don't know, Tim, if you would agree with that. I mean, I
I
don't
agree
even
with
think
that. I
about them,
mean,
honest with
I
you.
think the only thing, we're still waiting for that reform. We're waiting for reform when it comes to reimbursements. That big bill that was just passed doesn't do anything for us.
Yeah, I guess it holds
It's
tax your income tax rate
Yeah,
at the
it
same,
held
so that's
your
good.
tax steady, but as we all know, that the government will still get from you. It's the way it is. I mean, you can't, when you're profitable, you will pay tax.
Yeah.
When I talk to my personal accountants, I mean, he's always amazed that I don't remember that. Like there's really, everybody will sell you this idea that you can avoid taxes, but unless you're like one of our buddies that moved to Puerto Rico, there's not a
Yeah.
lot of loopholes.
No, there isn't. There's some, but at one point or another, you run out of them too, especially if you make money year after year. Um, That's how that works. Okay. Well, actually, there was a lot of good questions there. Yeah, so we just kind of wanted we were seeing a lot of changes in the market compared to 2024, so we just kind of wanted to throw it out there and talk through it and make sure that people are hearing. You know, Tim and I don't even, we haven't sold businesses in I don't know what 8 years or something like that. But you always kind of want to know what's going on in the market and where you are. Sometimes it just makes you feel better. So we wanted to put that out there. So if there's no other questions, we're going to wrap it up. You can get this video again on YouTube, LinkedIn, we'll email it out. We can be reached at independentrxconsulting.com. You can contact us there, send us emails, or even schedule time with us right on the website. Thanks for joining us. Tim, any other parting words?
No, thank you very much, on for getting this all together. And if anybody has questions, reach out to us. You're not alone out there. You might think you are, but there's several people that are doing the same thing. And when you're ready to consider your exit, let us try to help you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for getting on and listening to us. And we'll have another webinar in a month. All right, bye.
Yeah, thanks, Owen.